I first started working with the band in the fall of 2009. What was essentially supposed to be a 3-month contract as their digital and online strategy manager, which I thought was kind of a weird thing for a band to need. But I guess to be fair, I wasn't terribly familiar with the band at that time. I was fresh out of grad school and desperately needed a job, and it seemed like a pretty good idea. We met through a mutual friend who had been with them since their earliest days as a band in Chicago in the late 90s, early 2000s, where they were slogging it out, playing clubs, and he was there with them when they got signed to Capitol Records in 2001, in which was really, in hindsight, one of the sort of the sunset of the major label contract. This was a system where they would basically give you a big advance and then cover everything. They would pay for the recording costs and manufacture and distribution and marketing, a radio campaign. They'd send you out on tour and hope to recoup that money. This was obviously not a gift. This was basically a high-risk bank situation. The major labels were really, especially then, but also now, we're in this position of being a hit-based economy. Right, so they would bet on 1,000 albums in a given year, knowing full well that 995 of those albums are going to not only not make them any money, but lose them large sums of money. And the upside was that the other 5 or 6 were going to make so much money that they recouped all those losses and make enough profits for the labels to make a bunch of money and to have enough money left over in the bank to do the whole thing again the next year. And this had worked out pretty well for the major labels for a long time. For the last 60 or 70 years, the music industry was really the recorded music industry, right? They had sort of found a way early on to take all the value associated with music and stick it into this object, right? And then sell that object at a big profit, right? So this was a record or a cassette tape or a CD or whatever it was. And so they were able to create an entire system around this where they were able to, pay for manufacturing and distribution and marketing and know that all that was going to get recouped by these big profits. We could sort of talk for a long time about how they managed to screw themselves over really slowly for a very long period of time without doing anything. But that's sort of what was in the process of happening when OK Go came on board with them. The writing had been on the wall since the CD was invented, and they had translated music into ones and zeros, right? So all of a sudden, this object-based economy was really going to be foundering, right? That all of a sudden, replication was infinite, essentially, and that distribution costs were plummeting to zero almost immediately. And instead of doing anything about this for a long period of time, they just sort of kept taking the profits off of CDs and then sort of spent a long time crying when everything was going online, and they hadn't found a way to get paid by that. So this model was sort of in the process of being broken, and OK Go sort of found themselves as one of these majority bands, right? One of the bands that wasn't making money for the label. They were one of the 995, right? And so they had put out their first album in the early 2000s and had done okay and had toured the world, and but really, had not been successful. There wasn't really an alignment of success there with the label, and they were actually focused on a very small problem in around 2004, where they said that they've been playing these really loud, raucous, high-energy rock shows to rooms full of mostly sort of shoegazing hipsters, right? People sort of standing around, nodding at them while they're, playing their hearts out for these guys. And so they were trying to solve this problem for their next tour and say, like, what could we do that would be getting people actually excited and interested in moving? And so they decided the thing that they could do would be in the middle of their live set to put down all of their instruments and bust into a synchronized dance routine. That was their solution. They just thought this would be funny. So, where's my, oh, here it is. So they set up a camera in Damian Kulash, the lead singer, in his backyard. And they brought in his sister Trish, who was a professional ballroom dancer at the time. And they basically spent a week working out a synchronized dance routine that they would do on stage in the hope of getting people excited. And they set up a locked-off camera on a tripod and recorded this basically as a rehearsal tape. And showed this tape to their friends, who thought it was fucking hilarious, and those friends showed it to their friends, and it sort of became this thing in their community where it was like, this is actually pretty funny, like maybe we could do something with this. So, they went to the newly hired head of digital at Capitol Records and sat down in the big boardroom and they said, hey, we've got this crazy thing that we think could be the video for one of our songs. You should check this out. So they sit around and they watch this video, and he says to them, he says, if anyone sees this, you're sunk. This is the most embarrassing thing that I've ever seen in my life. Please burn this tape. Please don't show it to anybody. And they said, right, okay, no problem, thank you, and went and promptly put it online. And so they, and this sort of was, this was the real kind of earliest days of viral videos, 2004, 2005, when they put this online, and they were just astonished by the feedback. They started literally getting tapes sent back to them of other people doing this dance as far away as Korea and all over Europe, and this just became this sensation for them, and it was phenomenal for them to see that they really had this reach, because they had felt like they hadn't really been able to achieve what they wanted to so far through the major label system, right? They weren't able to sort of translate what they were interested in doing into this kind of object-based economy. And so they immediately set out to do something else in this vein, because, I mean, they were classified as musicians, but like so many people, there's these boxes, right? You're a musician, you're an artist, you're a filmmaker, but sort of as the world gets more increasingly just a matter of ones and zeros, you can sort of be all these different things, right? And so these guys were really able to explore. So they went out and they got a bunch of treadmills, right? And they went down into one of the guys' basements, and again, they brought in Trish, the ballroom dancer, and they spent a few weeks creating another ludicrous dance routine because they thought it was funny. And they worked on this video that basically became a video for the song Here It Goes Again. And this one they put online again about a year later, and this one just blew up. I mean, within a couple days, they had 1 million hits. And today, 1 million hits happens all the time, right? You can buy those sorts of view counts now if you want to. But at the time, this was a really big deal. I mean, to the point where they literally had an email from to webmaster@okgo.net from Chad@youtube.com, right? One of the two founders of YouTube, saying, hey, we saw your video on stupidinternetvideos.com or whatever. We've got this new service called YouTube. We really think this video would be a good match. You should put it up there and check it out. And they did. And just to put 1 million in context again at the time, this was more than the entire number of albums that this band had sold, plus the entire number of people that this band had ever played in front of in their entire lives by like several orders of magnitude. So all of a sudden, they were sort of in this place where they were having all this success online and all their sort of ability to reach all these people and get all these people excited and get all this attention, and none of it was translating back, right? The label was not excited about this. This was not making people go buy little plastic discs with music on it. So there was this real disconnect. So we sort of cut then to 2009, and it starts making a bit more sense why they would want a digital guy, right? They weren't super enthused with the digital guy at Capitol Records, which at this point was EMI Capitol, and sort of this long, slow process of the major labels eating themselves and drowning themselves to death. And they were getting ready to put out their third album. The album was done. It was on its way to stores. All the publicity was set up. Everything was kind of underway. I was there to help them kind of engage with this online community. And EMI makes an announcement, and they say, we are going to disallow the embedding of YouTube videos of our artists' music videos, which basically means that if you want to watch any of our artists' music videos on the entire roster, you need to literally go to youtube.com and then search for that video and watch it. And this sort of nearsighted vision was basically, the idea was that this is what they could monetize, right? That if you went to YouTube and watched the video, there were these little ads around the videos in 2009, and this was the only way that they were going to make any money. So, we could talk a lot about how you're throttling virality and not actually reaching people where they are, but this was a major problem, especially for a band like OK Go, who relied so heavily on videos as a sort of a way to get attention. The day that they turned off embedding of YouTube videos, our view counts dropped by 90%. It was an extremely frustrating day. It told us very quickly that people were not watching videos on YouTube, that what we all sort of know as common sense now is that people are discovering videos on the blogs that they read, on the news sources that they're at, on their friends' Facebook feeds, right? I mean, this is all kind of no-brainer common sense stuff, but at the time, this was sort of, just not in EMI's headspace whatsoever. So we kind of flipped out, and we spent a lot of time yelling at the people at Capitol Records and EMI, who by and large, are good people. I mean, it's like any industry that sort of worked itself out of the equation as they managed to, which is that the people there are smart and passionate, and they're just stuck in a really, really shitty situation. So that, combined with a bunch of other uninteresting details, led us to a conversation where we said, look, this really isn't working out. We're not selling records for you. You guys aren't aligning with what we're good at. Why don't we part ways? Why don't you let us out of our major label deal, please, and give us our album back, and we'll just kind of drift off into the sunset. And as a testament to sort of how focused they were at the time on this tiny little percentage of hit makers and how uninteresting we were as a smaller band, they said yes. Despite the fact the album had been out 2 weeks, they had paid for the recording of everything, everything was lined up publicity-wise. They said, you know what, guys, Godspeed, go your own way, here's the rights to your album back, go for it. And so we sort of said, oh shit, okay, well, now we have to do that. And so we sort of took a moment and regrouped and basically immediately started a little company. I mean, we set it up as a record label, but it's also a production company and a sort of catch-all company behind the band that's called Paracadute. It's Italian for parachute. At the time, it seemed funny. And now it's just hard to pronounce. But it's, so we spent some time thinking. We said, fuck, how are we going to make money? Right now we sort of have to put money where our mouths are. We've been talking so much about how we have this sort of new model that we know where the music industry is headed. We have all this attention online. This object-based economy that the music industry is still trying to prop up is dead. And what do we do? And so we started talking to brands, and even at the time, this was kind of a no-brainer, right? That there's a lot of branded entertainment, corporate sponsorship, but it was mostly in the realm of the Rihannas and the U2s and the sort of really big bands that they could actually sell records and therefore be of an appeal. But so we started having these conversations with these different brands and said, look, we have all this attention online. No one is watching your ads. We make cool content that people want to see. Why don't we get together? You guys can underwrite some videos, and we'll do something. So we did a string of projects, and I'll run through them pretty quickly here. You can check them all out on our YouTube channel. But this was sort of the first big sponsored video we did after we left the major labels, which was we took over this 10,000 square foot warehouse space in LA and created a 2-story Rube Goldberg machine, sort of dominoes hitting this and that, that was all synchronized to the music of a particular song. And this was underwritten by State Farm Insurance, who we talked with sort of at length about how the structure would be, and we basically said, we're going to make some crazy shit, kind of whatever we want, and you guys can slap your name on it, and they said, sounds great. And this ended up being a really big success for us and for them. It was sort of 30 million views, and tons of media attention as sort of the first big thing we did out of the gate, and really worked out. This first one over here is the little truck that had the State Farm Insurance logo on it. That was basically the nod that we gave to them on that. We did a marching band video with the Notre Dame Marching Band. It was sort of another one-take video that we did. It was a collaboration with them. We did a project with Samsung where we took 4,000 pieces of toast and collaborated with some MIT Media Labs guys to laser etch on each of the 4,000 pieces of toast to create a stop-motion animation video that we use Samsung cameras to shoot, and they help pay for it and promote it and the whole thing. This was a project we did with Range Rover where the band basically did a 5-hour parade through the streets of LA to spell out OK Go through the city using sort of GPS coordinates. This was with Range Rover. And this was a project that we did with Google Japan. It was a big HTML5 sort of Chrome experiment where you'd have sort of 30 different browser windows open creating this whole video that we did with the sort of technical geniuses over there at Chrome. And then probably the biggest project that we did in the cycle was with Chevy. Chevy sort of had this wonderfully vague brief where they said, what would you guys do with a car? And we said, well, here's what we should do. We should weld a bunch of mallets to the outside of the car and then create a 1-mile racetrack in the desert outside of LA that is comprised solely of the instruments that we will then hit with the car to create the song as we're driving. So the band took stunt driving lessons, the whole thing, and we had 50 pianos up on their side that the car would thwack as it drives by. We had 300 guitars strapped to a fence for the guitar solo, each one tuned to a single note, so on and so forth. And Chevy said, "Yep, sounds great, let's do it." And they were, to their credit, they were really awesome. All these brands, it's full of its headaches, but I was surprised through the last 3 years, just sort of how receptive people are to the fact that we're making crazy stuff and they kind of just need to let us run with it. This one that ended up being a Super Bowl ad 2 years ago, and was the #1 viewed video on YouTube for Super Bowl Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and was this huge success. So that all worked out great. It was a tremendous pain in the ass in each and every case. It was, each one was this sort of finite project that we did with one brand. We had to find the brand, we had to talk to them, we had to pitch them a bunch of projects, settle on one, negotiate the whole thing, lots of boring stuff, right? And for every 10 projects that we pitched, one would happen. So it worked out great. It was definitely the most financially lucrative and creatively rewarding album cycle that the band has ever done. But it's done now. So that album cycle is finished to bed. And now we're sort of in this position where we would like to find a way to do it a little bit differently. We feel like we've sort of kicked the edges of what this model is and sort of kicked around the idea a lot of sort of what is the new model for the music industry. How do you sort of go from this object-based economy to an attention-based economy and in a way that actually gets the bands funded, gets the audience what they want. I mean, in every one of these cases, I mean, I grew up in the late 80s and early 90s. The 16-year-old inside of me is like, you're a sellout. You're a fucking sellout. You guys like this? Like, if this had happened when I was a kid, I would have hated a band that had done this. But in every case, we had this very clear communication chain with our audience. And we say, look, we want to make this cool stuff. We don't have any money. You guys don't want to pay for anything. And these guys over here, they've got a bunch of money, and they're going to let us do whatever we want. Is that okay, right? This is just sort of this engaged conversation that says, this is what we're doing, this is how we're figuring out how to pay for it, let's go. And in every case, it worked out. But what we're really trying to do now is sort of tease this out into a model that could actually be sustainable. So we've got the new album finished as of 2 weeks ago, the 4th album. It'll be the first one that we put out exclusively by ourselves. We've got 4 or 5 insane video projects that we're working on. We've got a bunch of interactive projects. I've got slide over here. Oh, we did some stuff with the Muppets and Sesame Street and NPR. We just released an app that actually has nothing to do with the band except that it has our name on it, and the fact that the guitarist is a coder and he actually coded the game himself. This has 1 million installed users right now. So we're basically trying to shape a world where we can be creating all sorts of projects. They can be apps, they can be videos, they can be all these different things. And instead of piecemealing each one, we want to sit down with a small cadre of partners and say, right, we've got 12 months to 18 months worth of content coming out 6 months from now. Let's figure out a way to create a timeline of touch points, right? Of these sort of like big climaxes along the way, and we work together and really identify your needs as a brand or as an underwriter of this process, and align that with what we want to do, and see if we can't sort of align these incentives to create a new version of the album cycle. Rather than it being all about this sort of little object, let's see if we can't make it be about what people actually want to see and what people, and find a way to displace the payment of this to make it actually work in this economy. And that's it. I've got 26 seconds left, but I'm just going to stop. Thanks a lot for your time. Appreciate it.